Well, welcome to another Tyrrell's Classic workshop, and this is a video with a twist. I'm at the National Exhibition Centre Classic Car Show, which is, I think, one of the biggest indoor classic car shows in the whole of Europe, actually, certainly the UK. And there are many interesting and weird and wonderful classic cars here. And I've decided, the organisers said to me, why don't you do a video of your 10 most interesting cars of the show to you? And I thought, that's a good idea, why not? I realise this video will be put out and edited after the event, but hopefully it brings a bit of a different twist to the event and what's going on. I have behind me Harry Metcalf's Lamborghini Countach, which has just completed we did an extensive overhaul and rebuild on it some months ago, and he's just completed a 2,500 mile trip around the north of Italy and back, visiting the Lamborghini vineyard, etc. And we, after we'd done the work, he took it on the trip, and it's done 2,500 miles. It used that much oil under dipstick, easy for me to say, hardly any water, and it did over 20 miles to the gallon, and he was doing 150 miles an hour with loads to come effortlessly. And for me and the team back at base, I'll call them out by name: Marcus, Pete, James, Craig, Steve on the leatherwork, Alex, Corey, etc. A big thank you, because this has been the most amazing rolling advert for us, actually. But I'm not going to include this as one of my top cars, my top 10 cars, because that would be too easy. So we'll move on and we'll see what other little delights I've come across while walking around the NEC. Well, this is one of my choices because I've always been very fond of these and always admired them a lot. This is a BMW M5. It's the first generation BMW M5, as a matter of fact, and this is the E28, which is a remarkably compact and light car. I mean, BMW made a load of these E28s, 528i's, 525s, 520s, even a 518, a 1.8 litre. But this was the daddy. This is the M5. It's got the engine from the BMW M1, 24 valve, race-derived, straight six. It was originally conceived for the BMW M1, and I covered that in a video a while back. BMW then shoehorned this into the 5 Series body shell. This is one of those cars, they made 187 right-hand drive only, a very rare car. There are about 40, I think, left in the UK. There are 19 on the road, and a lot of them have gone to Hong Kong. So Paul was telling me, the owner here. But I mean, this is a beautiful example. It's in salmon silver, and it's just with black Recaro interior. This is a car I'd like to take home. Well, this is another of my choices. I'm no stranger to these cars. This is a Ferrari 330 GT 2+2. And we've actually done a lot of work on these over the years, and I've featured them on videos. They were all expensive cars, these, when they were new. These were in very rarefied air, really, these cars. Enzo Ferrari actually had one as his everyday transport at a stage in time. But also, John Lennon had one. He had a blue car. But this is probably, almost certainly, the most famous and interesting of them all. Although you wouldn't think so to look at it. This is the original paint from 1964, largely. But what makes this car special is John Surtees actually was the owner of this car. He won the Formula One Drivers' Championship in 1964 for Enzo Ferrari, and he won 6 Grand Prix, but he was the only person in the world, before, during or since, to have won both world championships on 2 and 4 wheels. So John Surtees was a very talented and interesting, a genius driver, really. When he won the World Championship for Ferrari in 1964, Enzo Ferrari presented him with this car. He obviously drove it during the season, And then at the end of the season, Enzo Ferrari was a very ruthless commendatore. He had hot and cold running racing drivers coming through his premises with an alarming rate of speed. And he decided that John Surtees was not going to be his driver of choice anymore. And John Surtees drove to Maranello in this car. There was a discussion, the contents of which nobody knows, between him and Enzo Ferrari, and he left in a rather unpeaceful state of mind, shall we say, got in this car, drove away from Maranello, and that was the story of John Surtees and this Ferrari. It's actually got an agreed value of, let's just say comfortably, into several multiples of what a normal Ferrari, normal if such a thing exists, 330 GT 2+2 would command, simply because of its history. I mean, there aren't many Ferraris that were presented by Il Commendatore himself to his prized racing drivers. So a fantastic piece of Ferrari history. It's wonderful to have it here on the Ferrari Owners Club stand at the show. A real privilege. And yeah, I'd also be driving this one home if only I could. Well, how could I possibly ignore a certain Italian maestro who has had such an effect on my life and so many other people's lives, whether we know it or not, from Renault Magnum trucks to nightclubs in his early days, to some of the most beautiful cars ever created, and some of the most underrated cars ever created. And I would say this car falls into that category. The Fiat X1 It was styled and engineered bodywork-wise by Bertone, as a lot of Marcello Gandini's cars were, but it's very faithful to the, you can call it a mini Miura if you like, really. It's transverse mid-engined, it's a two-seater, it's also a Targa top. It was built right from the word go to be strong enough structurally not to have a solid roof, so you've got wind in the hair motoring as well, and this concept, I think, was never really examined or fulfilled to the extent that it could or should have been. It started life with a 1300 single overhead cam engine, which was a little jewel of an engine from Fiat. Then they went on to a 1500 version, and with the benefit of hindsight, there is a beautiful twin cam cylinder head, which can bolt straight on to the bottom end of these, the block. And I think in 124 Sport Coupe form, it was 1600cc. With the twin cam head, it had two Weber 40 IDF downdraft carburetors, and that developed, I think, 110 brake horsepower, which would have made this car go really, really well. I'm very fond of the X1 They rust like any other Italian car does. There's very few of them left, actually. But this is another car that I just love. That they're so sweet handling. You think your way around corners. There's no weight on the front end to speak of. It's all sort of mid-engined, so that you've no need for power steering. It's incredibly light. Just a joy to drive these cars, actually. And this is a very, very, very unusual example. This is the Lido, which was a special edition with black and cream interior. These cars are so rare now. There's a handful of them left in existence, and just a lovely example of Marcello Gandini's genius. And you'd actually almost walk past this car, but it has a prettiness about it. It's a beautifully proportioned, 1970s sort of slight wedge appearance to it, but not in your face. Just a little jewel of a car, the X1 actually. I like them very much, so that's why it's in my top 10. Well, another one of the cars that I'm really charmed by at this show is this car. It's the Opel GT. General Motors, so heavily influenced by the Corvette Stingray in design, but made by Opel in Germany, and just the most incredibly smooth, svelte, cute, pert. You could throw loads of gorgeous adjectives at the styling of this car. It's genius, it's lovely. So this beautiful shape, it's an Opel, it was called the Opel GT. It's got the Opel Manta, Ascona running gear of the time, which were sort of more conservative coupe and saloon respectively. Vauxhall Cavalier mechanicals, if you will, if you anglicize it. A very strong, sturdy 4-cylinder engine. And but this particular car has been modified with twin Weber carburetors up to 130 brake horsepower. But more than that, it's got a nitrous kit on it as well, which has given it another 50 or so brake horsepower. So it's up to round about 200, according to the owner. And that will make this car incredibly interesting to drive. It is just, I've always loved the shape of these cars. It's like a mini Corvette. And let's have a look at one of the more interesting aspects, because I'll bet you've never seen pop round headlights before. Amazing. Well, here is another absolute cutie. This is a 1964 Alfa Romeo Giulietta Sprint. It's 1300cc, so it sounds terribly unimpressive, a 1300cc engine, but it's that beautiful Alfa Romeo evergreen engine that they had at the time, an all-alloy engine. But there's no weight in this car. It's well under a ton in weight, which means it's an absolute delight to drive because all the controls are equally synchronized weight-wise. There's nothing heavy on this car. The brakes have a nice gentle pedal feel. The clutch, the accelerator, the steering, the gear change, they're all of a piece, and that makes them delightful to drive. And what better praise could this car have than Gordon Murray? I had the privilege of meeting Gordon Murray a few years ago. We were both at the same venue, but with different car clubs. And he turned up in one of these. And I mean, Gordon Murray is a great advocate of the lightweight, the Colin Chapman school of add lightness. And this car, it really exemplifies that. It's just it's all very finely done. The door handles, these delicate door handles are off a Ferrari GT 2+2, 250 GT 2+2 Pininfarina Coupe. Just the way everything works. It's just incredibly cute. Well, this is another of my choices. This is a late 1980s Peugeot 309 GTI. Why do I like it? Because it's a slightly left field car, this. It's basically, the 205 GTI was one of the revolutionary hot hatches. That and the Renault 5 GT Turbo, the Golf GTI. They sort of turned the world on its head with regard to hot hatches in the late 70s, early 80s. But the 309 was a sort of the underdog and sort of pushed to one side. But these are a great car. They are a full 4-seater and they've got the 1.9 GTI Peugeot engine developing 130 brake horsepower, quite respectable. And they handle beautifully. They handle just like the 205 GTI. That can be a good or bad thing because normally with front-wheel drive cars, because all the weight's at the front, you have understeer where the car tends to go straight on when you try and go around a corner. But with these, the most extraordinary thing happens. And the first time it happened to me, I got the fright of my life, actually, because they develop oversteer. Even though the whole weight's at the front, the back end lets go before the front does. So you're going around a corner and you get like oversteer that you would get in a rear-wheel drive car where the back of the car actually moves. But it makes for a thrilling drive. It's accessible. It's not a 500 horsepower thing. It's accessible and it's good fun. So this is on my list, the 309 GTI. It's got the 1.9 alloys, which were particular to the 205 of that engine size. And I just like them. My friend Paul, my dear friend Paul used to have one of these. We've had lots of great fun in this car. It's just, yeah, This is a car that's personal to me, bit of my story. A friend had one. What's not to like? This is a really, really interesting driver's car, and there's very few of them in this condition now. Well, this is another one of my favourites. This is a Rover SD1, which is possibly one of the saddest indictments of the British motor industry, because this car promised so much and it was launched to such fanfare, and rightly so. It was a world beater, this car. But unfortunately, its fate was sealed by appalling quality control, terrible trade unions, and similarly terrible management, which very unfairly dealt this car a bad hand, actually, which is a shame, because I think they're wonderful. It was Rover's replacement for the revolutionary when launched, but long in production. I think it was something like 12 years in production, the Rover P6. And it was a brave new world. Spen King, the head designer at Rover, and his team, David Bates, all the development engineers, came up with something revolutionary. It's blatantly based on the Ferrari Daytona, but that's okay. The Ferrari Daytona is one of my favourite cars. And my dad bought one of these new in Midas Gold in 1978 because I pestered him so much. And it had electric windows. It was the first car we'd ever had with electric windows. And we went to collect it in London. It was Midas Gold with a nutmeg interior. I really like these. I think they do so many things so well. They've got that beautiful little Buick small block all-alloy V8, which was modified by Rover. They're very well packaged, huge luggage compartment, spacious seating, and they're fun to drive as well. They handle beautifully, and this is a particularly interesting example because it's done 40,000 miles from new, and it's largely original. And it's got these were the optional factory alloy wheels. You could get the pressed steel wheels with the stainless steel hubcaps. But I just think they're a pretty car. They go well. You could get sort of thick end of 30 miles to the gallon out of them at the time. Yeah, it was a good package, and it should have been a world beater, but it didn't. It just didn't quite happen. But I don't care. I still love the Rover SD1. I think they're a great car. Well, here's an unexpected bonus ball for me, and probably for you too. This goes against everything that makes me tick. It's electric and it's Chinese. I mean, please, no disrespect to anybody, but I prefer British, Italian, German, whatever. But this one has most emphatically knocked me on my head and slipped through the net, because I think it's absolutely amazing. This is the MG Cyberster. The gentleman's had this for 2 weeks. It's hot off the press as a model and as a car. This is the twin motor. It's fully electric, 503 brake horsepower, something like that, with a torque curve to match. Twin motor, front and rear, so it's four-wheel drive. We went to Salon Privé a few weeks ago, probably a few months ago, and I thought to myself, what is that? I'm a sucker for red metallic, red pearlescent paint, and I thought, what is that stunning car? And we went over, and it was an MG, as of course reinvented. And I just thought, my goodness me, this is an amazing package. I haven't driven one. I'm sure I will one day soon, but I think they're amazing. This has completely surprised me, this car, and of course it has got one or two little party pieces. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's a very interesting package, this. It's got all sorts of little party tricks, but I mean, 500 brake horsepower. It's got a real world range, probably of over 200 miles by the time you got the air conditioning and everything else working. But what a load of fun this is. So I'm very happy to include this on my video, because there aren't many new cars I get frothy about. But this is one of them, the MG Cyberster. Well, here's another unlikely candidate for my top 10 cars of the show. It's this, the Bristol 412. And this is a real curio, and that's why I love it. because I've always thought to myself, they really are not very pretty cars. I'm saying that because the owner is within earshot. I've always thought, oh my goodness me, these are not a pretty looking car at all. They have these Avon safety wheels on, which were one of the first run flat tyres. But then I had one in for work. I thought to myself, gosh, they're big, they're bulky, they're square. It's got the 6.2 litre Chrysler V8, if my memory serves me correctly. And I had one in for work. And I got in it and I thought, oh my goodness, this is why people buy Bristol 412s. It's essentially a 411, the previous curvy model, reskinned with some modifications. But I was astonished at how well this car drove. Sometimes in life, in the car industry, I've been privileged to drive a lot of different and eclectic and varied cars, and some of them have horrified me. And some of them I've thought, gosh, this is amazing. It's far better than it has any right to be. And this car, as a model, fell into that category. When I first drove a Bristol 412, I was astonished at how beautiful it was to drive. You've got this quite high seating position. So you're master of all your survey. You've got this removable roof panel. This folds down at the back, so you can actually almost have open top motoring, if you will. And you're sat there empirically looking over everybody else with this beautiful Chrysler V8 powering you along. They really are something special. So I'm going to make this one of my cars of the show, a Bristol 412. Well, this has been an interesting experience. It's been a lot of contrasts in the making of this video, and that's, of course, it's all part of the interests of being in this business, the classic car business. But we have here a very, very interesting car. This is a 1909 Rolls-Royce 4050 horsepower, which was the British fiscal rating for car engines was done in horsepowers. So obviously this is a big machine. The engine's, I think the Ghost is 7.5 litres, straight six engine from memory. And this is a 1909 car, and the Silver Ghost, as the model became known, got its name from a car that was built in 1907 called the Silver Ghost. It had the polished aluminium bodywork, the bonnet and bulkhead the same as this, but the body was done in a beautiful silver paint, metallic silver paint, coach painted of course, brush painted as all cars were at that time. But this particular car has had a very interesting life, as a lot of Silver Ghosts or 4050 horsepowers have. I remember a friend of mine in the 80s had a Silver Ghost, 1923 car, so much later than this. And he negotiated with a farmer for over 20 years about buying the car, because it was on the farmer's land and a tree had grown up through the middle of the chassis, and the farmer didn't want to chop the tree down. So the Silver Ghost stayed there for over 20 years. But the thing is that at this time, you bought the chassis, so from here forward and from there back was how they came: the bulkhead, the bonnet, the radiator grille, or the radiator shell, the radiator itself, and the running gear. And then you had your coach builder of choice put a body on it. And the bodies could be anything and everything. And the Ghosts 4050s have had so many changes of bodies, a lot of them over the years. This car, this is the Bewley Motor Museum stand, and they've kindly allowed me to film this car. This car has been a tow truck and a pickup truck in its life, and we've got the photographs which I can put on screen. But it's many decades ago it had this body put on it, and this is called a Roi de Belge body. It's a particular type of body. It's effectively a 4 or 6 seater, depending on how slim the occupants are. And this is the definitive 4050 horsepower body. This was as good as it got in Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost speak. Roi de Belge, it's called that because one of the Belgian royal family specified their 40 to 50 horsepower car with this style of body on it. and it's got this huge convertible hood which comes right over and latches onto the windscreen, and that converts it into what was called a touring car, because the side screens were also removable. They were flat panels with windows let into them, but of course the rudder belge, this is the definitive 40-50 horsepower still Silver Ghost layout, and it is just probably, I think, one of the most elegant cars ever made. They are a very labour-intensive car. To start an early Ghost like this, there are 23 operations you have to do before you can start the engine. And this car is an early Ghost, so I think 1921 they brought four-wheel braking out, but before that you only had brakes on the rear wheels. Can you imagine doing an emergency stop in that, in modern traffic? So it's these wooden cartwheels, wooden spoked. I've come across this with Ghosts in America. As the hot weather and the lack of humidity in Texas or the southern states, it actually affects the wheels, and they begin to split or they begin to retract into the rim, and they actually click. When you drive the Ghost, they go clackety clackety clack, and that's because the spokes have actually shrunk out of the rims. So the British climate is the best for these kind of wheels. As I said, the bodywork is polished aluminium. The radiator is nickel. This is what's called a honeycomb radiator. So this is not a grille. This is actually the radiator, which is hand soldered layer by layer. And this is nickel. The radiator is nickel, and that means every time it rains, this gets covered in stains from the rainwater, and it has to be repolished. So this is solid nickel, otherwise you'd wear through the plating in no time. You'll notice it's got no flying lady on it, no mascot on this car. And the reason for that is because it wasn't invented yet. The flying lady, or Spirit of Ecstasy, was designed by Charles Sykes in 1911, so 2 years after this car was made. And the reason why it was made was because customers of Rolls-Royce were having the most crazy mascots made. Sausages on a stick, their favourite elephant, their great Aunt Nellie, whatever it was, they had a mascot made of it, and Rolls-Royce said, we are not having, this is an extremely prestigious car, we are not having crazy mascots on the front of our cars. So they commissioned Charles Sykes to develop the Flying Lady, the Spirit of Ecstasy, which every Rolls-Royce has had since. And that came out in 1911 after this car. This is a fabulous car. The engine is incredibly quiet on these cars. In fact, at the Rolls-Royce Owners Club in America, they actually have a decibel meter, and one of the categories for the shows, for the Concours d'Elegance, if you have a line of Silver Ghosts being judged, one of the criteria is they use the decibel meter and a stethoscope, so that they lower the revs on the engine to 200 or 300 RPM, so it's only just running and no more, and then they see how quiet, mechanically quiet the engine is. And the quietest one is the winner, obviously. But these are a fast car. Remember, this is two-wheel brakes on a tiny tyre tread. These can do over 70 miles an hour. I've been on Rolls-Royce rallies over the years where I've been driving along in a Silver Cloud or something, and a Ghost's gone whoom past me. Because as soon as they get on the open road, they can foul their plugs up a bit, they give them some, open the throttle. This is a fast car with that amount of braking area on the whole car. Absolutely extraordinary machine. Yeah, just a delight to be able to include this in the video. So there we go. Well, that concludes another Tyrrell's Classic Workshop video. Bit different. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back with something else very soon.